poor and humble artisan, of dark and modest name, there was a man in Borinquen, charitable and Christian, with a talent in his hands and calmness in his heart, encircled by the palm of pure and sweet happiness, of the gifts he gave for the benefit of the soul. Education in Puerto Rico during the 18th and 19th century was under the control of the Catholic Church. Pursuing a primary education was difficult since the number of schools was limited. However, in the early 19th century there were private efforts to educate the population. One of those private efforts began with Rafael Cordero. Cordero was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico on October 24, 1790. His parents, Lucas Cordero and Rita Molina, were devout Catholics and free blacks, and that had a massive impact on Cordero's childhood. From his humble beginnings, Cordero always put little emphasis on material wealth, making a living as a shoe and cigar maker. A baptized Catholic, he was known for his religious devotion and adherence to celibacy. His humble background and religious upbringing led him to dedicate his life to education. At a time when slavery was still present, Rafael Cordero, a black man, broke barriers by giving free education to children, regardless of their social status, leaving a humanist legacy that inspired others. In the 19th century, Puerto Rico was filled with social and educational barriers, which hindered educational opportunities for most of the population. Social classes were divided by race and economic status, prioritizing with Spaniards at the top, followed by Creoles, mulattoes, mestizos, and leaving free blacks and slaves at the very bottom. As such, the education system favored the wealthy, setting aside the poor who could not afford an education. Even though Cordero was a free black, he was educated. Although an exception at the time, he was homeschooled by his parents since blacks could not go to school. It is unknown how his parents acquired their freedom and education, but their social condition might have inspired Cordero to educate others since he knew the limitations for people like him. Another barrier to education was the availability of schools. In 1765, the Spanish sent Alejandro O'Reilly to study the socio-economic conditions on the island. According to O'Reilly's report, there were only 2 schools at the time, so the majority of the population was illiterate. The report revealed the limited educational access at the time. This scenario did not change much going into the 19th century, since education was not a priority for the government. It was not until 50 years after the abolition of slavery, in 1873, that schools were finally being prioritized. Despite facing overwhelming adversity, Cordero persevered and continued to dedicate his life to education. In a way, he broke educational barriers by providing free education to all children, despite his lack of financial resources. He established a private school free of charge in San Germán in 1810, and financed it working as a cigar and shoemaker. Years later, he established another school in Calle Luna, in Old San Juan, where he taught basic subjects such as English, mathematics, science, and Christian doctrine, with the help of his sister, Celestina Cordero. Following her brother's footsteps, Celestina established her own school for girls 10 years later. Through the establishment of these schools, the siblings helped increase the number of educational institutions at a time when schools were scarce, expanding educational opportunities for the less fortunate. Another way in which he broke educational barriers was through racial and social integration. In a society divided by class, Cordero taught regardless of children's socioeconomic background. In his schools, rich, poor, black, mixed, and white children learned side by side without distinction.
Yo creo que otra contribución importante es que en haber juntado en un mismo recinto niños blancos y negros los ayuda a superar las barreras raciales y a verlos como iguales, a no tener esos prejuicios de que aquel es menos que yo, aquel es mayor que yo, a ver niños pobres y niños ricos juntos.
Education was provided and could only be afforded by the elite. Therefore, Cordero wanted to make it accessible to others. In doing so, he brought a sense of unity and acceptance for all, where class and racial distinctions did not matter.
Porque cuando hay una reforma educativa en la década de 1860, donde no podía ejercer el magisterio aquel que no tuviera título, había una fisura dentro de la legislación que permitía la categoría de maestro incompleto, que es la del maestro que no tiene estudios ni tiene licencia. Cuando pasan esa legislación, el maestro Cordero escribe al gobierno a ver si él puede seguir enseñando como lo había hecho durante toda su vida, y el gobierno le da permiso para seguir enseñando.
A decree by General Messina recognized him as a full teacher, and people began to refer to him as El Maestro, the teacher. Cordero's teachings left a profound mark in Puerto Rican history, with him being viewed as a father of public education, promoter of racial integration, and as a humanist. His main legacy relies on providing free education for children regardless of social class or race, setting an example for the eventual establishment of public education in Puerto Rico. His dedication to children can be seen when he expressed, "I love children, and I am happy among them. It doesn't bother me, their days and their questions, nor their ignorance. They are so innocent and helpless." As a teacher, Cordero rejected any payment for his services. One exception was when he took a monetary award of 100 pesos given by the Economic Society of Friends of Puerto Rico and gave it to his poorest students. His public service work led the government to create more schools throughout the island, increasing educational opportunities for others. For instance, many schools and streets were named after Rafael Cordero in honor of his dedication to public education. As a reminder to others of where he established a school, a stone tablet was placed in his house. He is so revered that an award given to teachers has been titled the National Medal Rafael Cordero for teachers who distinguish themselves in the field of public education. Another contribution was the concept of integrated schools. The majority of the students he taught were black and poor. As his teaching reputation grew, many wealthy families took their children to him for an education, despite his race and that of his students. One can infer by this that Cordero's excellent teaching methods were not an obstacle for these families who were willing to integrate with people from a lower social background. In doing so, he helped break racial and social barriers, leading eventually to the integration of Puerto Rican society. Cordero left a legacy as a humanist with values that emphasized humility, dedication, unity, and acceptance. Cordero's impact affected people so heavily that the Catholic Church acknowledged his pious legacy. Cordero's Road to Sainthood was opened in 2002. The Novo Millennio Enunte is an apostolic letter published by Pope John Paul II that influenced the Church to begin the process of canonization for Rafael Cordero. In 2013, Pope Francis finally declared Cordero venerable, a title given to a deceased person who has attained a certain degree of sanctity but has not been fully beatified or canonized, setting the stage for canonization. He is the second Puerto Rican considered for canonization. In addition, Cordero's humanist legacy can be seen in some of his former students who became influential in the fight for abolition and independence of Puerto Rico. Many of them became doctors, lawyers, abolitionists, writers, priests, businessmen, as well as scientists. Among them, Alejandro Rivera, the father of Puerto Rican literature, Ramon Baldorio de Castro, and Jose Julian Acosta, both abolitionists and autonomists. Cordero inspired his students by teaching them values of acceptance and social justice, so they sympathized with the poor, slaves, and peasants. Therefore, as adults, they fought to free men from slavery and oppression, and the island from colonialism.
Todas estas personas, pues, fueron de alguna manera los que contribuyeron a la liberación de la esclavitud en Puerto Rico, debido a esa inspiración que el maestro Cordero les dio.
His humanism also inspired painters and writers through art. Many artistic creations have been made to honor Cordero's life and his impact on Puerto Rican society. For example, José Gualberto Padilla wrote a poem titled El Maestro Rafael, wherein he speaks about the values he left behind as a teacher and a person. Francisco Oyer, a Puerto Rican artist, made a painting of Rafael Cordero in his school along with some students, showcasing Cordero's dedication to public service. Rafael Cordero's life was truly inspirational, as he left a legacy that was life-changing in Puerto Rican society. The massive attendance of the public to his funeral demonstrated the profound impact this man had in Puerto Rico. More than 2,000 people paid their respects to the maestro in Santa Maria Magdalena de Pazzi Cemetery in San Juan. Many years later, at his death anniversary, thousands from all social spheres honored his memory with celebrations that ranged from literary circles and music celebrations. In his memories, Tapia y Rivera reflected on Cordero's death. Cordero's death was felt deeply, leaving a void among the lower classes that was hard to fill. Cordero was a humble man who promoted the spread of education in Puerto Rico, providing free education and encouraging social and racial integration. In doing so, his humanism motivated others to work for social justice, inspiring future generations to work for the betterment of society.